Hi there, welcome to Christina's English class. In this video, we are going to deal with the poem Small Towns, Small Rivers by Mamang Dai. But before that, let me tell you that I have covered Standard 12's poetry. For reference, you can watch my poetry playlist. Let us analyze the poem. Small Towns and the Rivers by Mamang Dai talks about life and death by using the symbols of small towns and the rivers. The structure of the poem. Small Towns and the River consists of 4 stanzas, each having an irregular line count. The overall poem doesn't contain any specific rhyme scheme, but the rhythm of the poem isn't monotonous at all. Monotonous meaning is repetitive. Let us see the literary devices. Small Towns and the River by Mamang Dai begins with a paradox. Poets generally associate the idea of death with small towns or any such habitations. In this stanza, there is personification. Here, the poet personifies her hometown, dust and wind. Moving forward in dreadful silence, there is a personal metaphor. Apart from that, the lines of the second stanza as well as the other stanzas mostly get connected by the use of enjambment. Enjambment is in simple terms called as couplet or stanza. However, in Sad Wreath of Tuberoses, the poet uses pathetic fallacy, that means comparison of human emotions with inanimate things like nature. Along with that, there is an epigram meaning saying or remark in life and death. Life and death, only the rituals are permanent. In the third stanza, there is a simile in the comparison between the river to a torrent of grief. In torrent of grief, there is a metaphor. There is a refrain that means a stop or a pause. The river has a soul at the beginning of 5th stanza. Moreover, in the midst of the mountain's top, there is alliteration. Here, the M sound gets repeated. In the following stanza, there is metonymy, that means substitution, in Golden East. And the house of the sun contains a circumlocution, which means tautology, repetition of verse. Let us read and understand the poem stanza-wise. Small towns always remind me of death. My hometown lies calmly amidst the trees. It is always the same, in summer or winter, with the dust flying or the wind howling down the gorge. Here, Small Towns and the River introduces the first paradox of the poem. The poet says the small towns remind her of nothing other than death. She lives in a town amidst the trees, but the life there is the same. According to the poem, living in the town is a monotonous journey that ends at the hands of death. Here the dust is a synecdoche that presents another symbol of death in this section. Moreover, the howling of the wind creates a gloomy mood. Here the use of onomatopoeia resonates with a pessimistic note, which means negativity. Stanza 2. Just the other day someone died. In the dreadful silence we wept, looking at the sad wreath of tuberoses. Life and death, life and death. Only the rituals are permanent. In the stanza, the theme of the death is conveyed. Just the other day someone died in a small town. The news makes the poet sad, and she mourns the loss. After seeing the sad wreath lying on a dead person's bosom, somehow reminds the poet of her mortality. Here the poet represents the tuberose as a messenger of death. Moreover, there is a repetition of life and death in this stanza. It refers to a continuous cycle of life and death. These two things are temporary. According to the poet, only the rituals are permanent. Here the poet turns the maxim, nothing is permanent except birth and death, upside down. The last 2 lines reflect the poet's disillusionment about life after seeing many deaths. Stanza 3. The river has a soul. In the summer, it cuts through the land like a torrent of grief. Sometimes I think it holds its breath, seeking a land of fish and stars. In the third stanza, by Mamang Dai, the poet represents a contrast, whereas in the previous section, she discussed mortality. In this section, she highlights the permanence of the river. She says the river has a soul. In summer, it flows across lands. Here, she uses the metaphor of torrent of grief to portray the river's course in the dry season. Moreover, the poet personifies the river to invest it with the ideas of holding the breath and seeking something. She thinks as if the river is an explorer who seeks the land of fish and stars. This imagery reflects the course of the river, water, and its flow. Stanza 4. The river has a soul. It knows stretching past the town, from the first drop of rain to dry earth and mist on the mountain tops. The river knows the immortality of water. In this stanza, the poet reiterates, that means she repeats, the river has a soul. The river knows about the towns where death lays her icy hands. Her knowledge isn't limited to towns only. She knows the first drop of rain that rejuvenates the dry earth and the mist on the mountain's top that circles the mountain like a scarf. Last but not the least, she is aware of the immortality of water. In this way, the poet also immortalizes the river. A shrine of happy pictures mark the days of childhood. Small towns grow with anxiety for the future. The dead are placed pointing west. When the soul rises, it walks into the golden east, into the house of the sun. In this stanza, the poet presents another contrast. Firstly, she refers to shrine of happy pictures of childhood. Childhood is the beginning stage of life. The happy pictures of one's childhood remind her of the purity of the soul at its dawn. That's why she compares her childhood days to a shrine. In contrast, small towns grow anxious about the future. It's the poet's anxiety about the death that eagerly awaits in the future. In the following lines, the poet refers to the eternity of the soul. The hope of shedding off the mortal burden and ascending to the house of the sun in the golden east revives the poet with new energy. Stanza 6. In the cool bamboo, restored in sunlight, life matters like this. Small Towns and the River by Mamang Dai, the meaning of life and its importance in this short stanza. According to the poet, life is like the sunlight that warms the cool bamboo. It's temporary and still beautiful. Moreover, the cool bamboo is a reference to the body, and the sunlight is a symbol of the soul. Apart from that, the poet says sunlight is important to any living plants. Likewise, life is also important for keeping the spirit of the universe alive. Stanza 7. In small towns by the river, we all want to walk with the gods. In the last two lines of Small Towns and the River, Mamang Dai transplants her dead thoughts from her mind. She says living in small towns has made the poet strong. Now the thoughts of spirituality and eternity are in her mind. Like the poet, others of the small town only wish to walk with the gods after their death. This section highlights the poet's belief in the afterlife and the eternal bliss. Apart from that, there is a repetition of the W sound in the last line. Such a harmonious rhythm reflects the poet's peaceful state of mind. That's all from the poetry section. I hope you all found these videos helpful and stay tuned for the next video. Thank you for watching.